Hello tiny friends, and welcome back to Tiny Keyhole Minis. I'm Jolene, and I just wanted to announce a new project that I was going to be working on this year. It's a project that I've been wanting to do, and I received a display box which was actually for a jersey shirt. It had a hanger in it, and it was displaying a football jersey. And I thought about what I could do with this display box. I came up with one of my favorite Stephen King novels, which is The Pet Sematary. Now, I'm going to be doing this project throughout the whole year. I'll be working on it along with the Josephine house and the dolls coming up and whatever else my mind comes up with. So, if you're not familiar with The Pet Sematary, there are a few versions of the movie, and I'm going to be referencing three. You got the original that came out in 1989, the remake of the original that came out in 2019, and then you got the most recent one that came out in 2023, and that's actually a prequel called Pet Sematary Bloodlines. So I'm going to be referencing all three movies, but I'm going to focus on the cemetery from the original because that one was my favorite version, and I feel like there's more detail. There's not a lot of still shots or movie shots when it comes to the cemetery. They give you enough to say, okay, this is a creepy cemetery, but you don't get a whole 360 view of the cemetery. So what I decided to do was try and create as much as I can from the still shots that I've collected, and then fill in the blanks with the cemeteries from the other two movies. I'll have to probably come up with some of my own ideas to fill in some of that space. Now, I've never done anything like this before, so I have a lot to learn. And I'm going to take my time with this because I want to showcase as many details as possible. I have a lot to learn. If you're not familiar with The Pet Sematary, it is a novel about a pet cemetery created by the local children that has been used for generations. And in the original movie, it doesn't really have much of a storyline in the movie. The original movie is basically about the Creed family that moves into the house, and on their property is a path that leads to the cemetery. The story of the Pet Sematary is that the locals use it to bury their pets. They've been using it for years and years. There is also a barrier in the cemetery that was put there to protect the locals because the barrier was not meant to be crossed. What's beyond the barrier? I'm sorry, Kiwi is pecking at me. This is Kiwi. So beyond the barrier is an ancient Indian burial ground, and the soil has something sinister lying in it, and folks have been known every now and then to cross that barrier and bury their pets or loved ones in that ground, and then they come back as basically the Walking Dead. I will create the barrier and, like I said, try to put as many details as possible in there. To compare the movies, you got the original from '89, you got the remake of the original in 2019. Let's talk about those two movies. The original, the Creed family moves in, they have a toddler son, they have a daughter about the age anywhere between 6 and 8. There's a fatal accident that involves their toddler son. Rachel Creed, the mom, has a sister, Zelda, who was the scariest character for me. She really scared me. She had spinal meningitis that left her mangled and bedridden. That character was played by a man originally, and she had quite a big part in the original movie. She was very scary. In the remake, they give it a little of a plot twist, which I appreciated. Instead of their toddler son being involved in the fatal accident, it was their daughter. Zelda doesn't have a very big part in the remake. There is also a group of kids that you see going back and forth to the cemetery, and they're wearing these vintage animal masks. And I have actually created those in miniature form in the past. So I think I'm going to add that into the cemetery so that it references that movie. In the original, you got the Creed family, and then across the street lives Old Man Judd Crandall. The old man is played by Fred Gwynne, who is the original Herman Munsters from the Munsters sitcom, the classic sitcom, which I grew up watching, so I absolutely love it. To talk about the prequel, it goes back to when Old Man Judd is a young man, and it tells his story. But the story of the cemetery does not begin there, because Judd's father has a story as well. So maybe in the future, they will create another Pet Sematary movie that tells Judd's father's story and goes back even further to when he was younger. The cemeteries are a little different. In the prequel, the cemetery is more of a dirt cemetery. It's a younger version. Judd Crandall is a younger man, and in the original, it's more grassy. So the grass has grown. So you get different versions of the cemetery as well. In the prequel, there is also an Easter egg. Stephen King does many novels, and the Pet Cemetery takes place in Ludlow, Maine, and his novel It takes place in Derry, Maine. In the prequel, you also see a sign that says Derry, so many miles down the road. So apparently, Derry and Ludlow were very close to each other, and the Pet Cemetery was not too far from where Pennywise the clown was dwelling. It's just a fun fact. A fun fact. So I have 3 different pet cemeteries to reference, but I will be focusing more on the 1989 version of the cemetery. The cemetery markers for the animals are created with salvaged wood and pieces that, you know, the kids could find and salvage. So you got markers made of table legs or, you know, bedposts. You just got random things. Like, I think I saw a piano, a little piano, like a part of a kid's piano. There's bits and pieces of and remnants of different. I think I saw like a little kid's ride on horse, and you know, you got to remember this is a cemetery built and mainly utilized by kids, so they're bringing in whatever they can to, you know, remember their pets and keep their pets' memories alive. It's very interesting, it's very detailed, and it's going to be pretty fun to try and create some of these pieces because I'm going to be creating most of them by hand. I will be creating the original 1989 Pet Cemetery entrance, which is my favorite entryway out of all 3 versions. It's more interesting. It's put together with different salvaged pieces, ladders, shutters, a salvaged wood, whatever they could find to create the entryway. It's just got more detail, and it's just going to be more fun to make. There is also another character in the movie, a cat named Church, named after Winston Churchill, and he is also played by different cats in each movie. I love them both. They're both scary. They're both good. This kitty here looks more like the 1989 version of Church. You will see him in the cemetery as well. When I decided I was going to do the Pet Cemetery, I came on YouTube and searched for Pet Cemetery dioramas, and I came across this amazing work of art. Holy moly. I only hope that my diorama can come just a fraction close to this diorama. I will put a link in the description box below so that you guys can see it. It's a pretty short video. He doesn't really show you how he creates a lot of this. He just goes over it, and it's kind of like an intro. But phenomenal artistry, phenomenal work, phenomenal detail. But overall, you get to see the whole diorama, and it's absolutely amazing. The video was created, I believe, like 9 years ago. A lot of talent, and I have no idea if I can even come close to that, but I am going to try. It's a bit intimidating, I'm not going to lie, to say the least. I mean, we're talking about a Stephen King novel here. Can I pull this off? But if you've been following me for some time, you know that I love detail. So I'm pretty good at including as much detail as possible in my pieces. So we will see. I'm going to try my best. That's all I can say. I have so much to learn, and I have no idea where to begin, but I'm getting there. I got my hair up, so my hair won't be in the way, and I'm going to get started. So today I'm just going to put the base together. I'm going to do my best as far as the angles and trying to get as much as I can for you guys to see. And now I guess it's time to get started. So let's see how much I can get done today, and hopefully I can get the whole base completely covered with the clay. It is very forbidden to bury your loved one, even a pet, beyond the barrier, because they do come back as something more sinister. So sometimes dead is better. Okay, I finally get to get this video out for you guys. It's been sitting around a while, and this is it. So I began using these square insulation boards. I can't remember what size these are, but they're pretty good size. They were the smallest pieces that the home goods store sold. So I bought 4 of them, and I'm going to be doubling them up and using 2 layers. Now I did begin using my craft knife, but I switched out to a bigger saw blade, which was a lot more easier to cut. So here you see me cutting with craft knives, but I did switch that out. So now that the pieces are in place, you can see how big this is and get a better idea of what I'm working with. Okay, so the front here will be where the entrance is. It'll be somewhere in the middle. And then I'm going to create a path. And then on the sides will be terrain, trees, and brush. I did leave the sides open because I'll be filling that in with aluminum foil. I just want different textures of the terrain. So right now there's 2 layers of the board, and then on the back, this will be where the barrier will be. And I did leave space in the back because I have to install lights in the barrier. In the movie, the barrier glows. So I'm planning on creating some sort of box to hide the lights behind the barrier. You'll see how this goes along as I'm moving along with this project. While my hot glue gun is heating up, I decided to go ahead and start creating the shape of the barrier. And I'm just using scrap cuts. When I look at the barrier, it kind of looks like a caved shape. And so I'm just going with a basic shape right now of what that looks like. I want the barrier to have different levels. I want the terrain to have different levels. Here you can see I have cut away some of the board from the top level, and I've left a hole. This is where the lights will be installed. And I'm just going to take these apart and kind of keep them in the same order that I have them, so I don't forget how I laid them out. I'm probably not going to be able to put them back in the right positions, but at least they'll all be in the same order. So I'm going to begin gluing, and I'm going to use tacky glue and hot glue. I'm just going to speed this up a bit because we all know how to glue and we all know how glue works. And this is what I call filler footage. So you can watch me here put a little bit of this together. As I stated earlier, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going with the flow and I'm learning as I go. So fun times. This whole thing is going to be a fun experiment. But I have been watching the modelers build terrains, the train modelers and the dioramas that are a lot tinier than this. They're like N scale and H scale, I don't even know, they're tiny. So I'm just learning from them, and everybody does different things to create the same thing. So I'll just take what I like and what my own ideas are and just put them together. And I'm going to be adding some extras around the sides. I know one side of the barrier has some rocks. I'm not going to make these into rocks, but I will be creating some sort of rocks. They're pretty big boulders. And I'm just going with the flow, tiny friends. You know, me and my big ideas, right? We all have these big, brilliant ideas, and then we don't know how to execute them. So I'm just going with it. But this is how we learn. You got to get in there and just do it. Even when you don't know what you're doing, you're definitely going to learn a lot. And that's what I'm doing. So now that this part is done, I did leave some space behind the barrier for some trees so that I can add some trees behind the sides of the barrier. Okay, the foam is done. The next step is to fill in the connecting areas with the foil so that there's more of a smooth transition. And I'm just filling in connecting points so I don't have any hard ledges and cliffs. The foil is very hot, so I'm using my finger guards for this, and I still managed to get 1 or 2 burns out of this. So be very careful when doing something like this. Make sure you're protecting your fingers. So this is what I've got so far, and I kind of got tired of filling in with foil, so I did as much as I wanted and could, as much as I could stand, and then I'm done. Okay, next is the paper-mache clay, and I am using the same method that Ara used for her Beetlejuice project for the landscape. If you haven't seen that, I will put a link in the description box below. I'm just using cheap toilet paper. This was like 97 cents for a 4-pack, and you can see how small the rolls are. So I've got 2 packs. Right now there are 8 rolls in here, and they're soaking in warm water. Now, I'm going kind of with the method that Ara went for because I'm just using it for landscaping. But Ara also linked the original recipe for Johnny's channel. I highly suggest you check that out. She's like the paper-mache lady, and she does all these awesome detailed animal masks. And she also shows you how to make the original recipe, which is quite different from this one. But this is working for what I need it to work for because I'm just building terrain. If you want a smoother consistency, definitely go with the original recipe. So I've broken this all down. I've squeezed out all the water. This is actually the second batch, and I'm making the same amount. So I have another 8 rolls. I've used a total of 16. I'm also going to use this DAP Fast and Final lightweight spackling. Right now, it doesn't even feel like there's anything in here. It's so light, but I need it to be very light because you guys saw how big this is going to be. So, it's kind of like frosting. It's really creamy. It's just like a light whipped frosting. Now, Johnny specifically said do not use this brand for the original recipe. But for what I'm using this for, it works just fine. So I'm using the whole tub of this with the 8 rolls of toilet paper. And then I'm going to use just Elmer's school glue. And I'm using about 1/4 of the bottle. So I'm just going to put some of this in here. and I'm going to mix this really well. I'm going to go right to my hands. Forget the spoon on this. But if you want to learn how to make this, if you need it to be really smooth for paper-mache type things, then you definitely want to check out Johnny's channel. If you're using it for terrain, you can go with this. It does have an odor, so if you're sensitive to odor, definitely wear a mask because this is kind of potent. But I'm just working it with my hands, and I'm going to mix it super good. Now, if you were a kid that always wanted to play with your mashed potatoes and never were allowed to, you might find this satisfying because that's what it's kind of like. It's kind of like playing with mashed potatoes. At first, I was a bit skeptical, and I wasn't sure how well this was going to stick, but I was quite surprised. It worked very well. And I don't really need this to be super smooth like Johnny's original recipe. I actually want as much texture as I can get. So being that this foam board has some sort of coating on the foam, again, I was a bit skeptical, but it sticks really well. So this worked out really well for me. And right now I'm just smoothing it down. I'm trying to get a really thin layer so I can make this stretch as long as I can. This was my first batch, and I did end up running out. So I used almost 2 full batches. I did have some left over. Johnny also explains how you can store this stuff, and you can actually freeze it. So I ended up freezing what little bit I have left for later use. So here I am moving along, and this is pretty fun. It is pretty satisfying to work with. And if you want it to be a little smooth, you can just dip your fingers in warm water and smooth it down. I don't need it to be super smooth, but I am smoothing it to the best that I need it to be. This sticks really well. Now, the more moisture you have in it, the longer it's going to take to dry. This first batch took a few days to dry, but it took me a few days to make a second batch anyways. And you can actually see how thin I'm trying to make this because I'm going to be layering the terrain. So I really don't need this to be super thick. I just need this to be my first layer and create my base. Okay, I'm going in with my second batch. This is a few days later, and the first batch is completely dried. And right now, I'm just trying to level out the second batch with the first. I'm just trying to get a good connecting point with this. And you can see all my little finger indents. That's perfectly fine. So I am not going to paint this. I decided from watching the terrain models and dioramas that I've been watching, I'm going to use mud. I'm going to use real mud because I kind of want this to be as realistic as I can get it. And real ground, real terrain begins with that layer of dirt, and then everything grows on top of that. So after this is completely dry and I collect some good dirt, I'm going to create some mud with dirt and glue, and I'm going to go in behind this, on top of this, and give it a whole layer of mud. And then from there I can start building and adding the grass and all the fun details and the trees. Yeah, that's a lot, but it's going to be fun to get to that point because I have tons of different grass and different types of things to create brush and nature's finest in the woods. So I will be leaving one whole side open for viewing, but I will be creating some brush up to the midsection of that. So the whole thing is covered, and I decided to go back in and add little hills. This will give me different levels of the terrain. I was actually checking out some wooded areas while I was dropping off my grandson to school, and I would notice that a lot of the trees were on top of these tiny little hills. And again, I want different levels to this terrain, so I'm going in to add little tiny hills. For the most part, the cemetery area is going to be a flat terrain, but when you get to the wooded area, those areas are never flat. So this is what I'm going for. Now this is going to definitely take a few days to dry, but this is really cool stuff to work with, and you can mold and shape. So it's working out. It's great. Once I get to start growing the trees and the grass, I'll be referencing the movie. Right now, I really don't need that. So you can see where I've built a lot of these little hills. And I did put a few around the barrier. So for the most part, the barrier is dried. And you can see where I've added some hills, and there are a few on the flat surface where the cemetery is going to be, because I do want some texture. I didn't put much. I only put a few, like 3 or 4. You can see one here, and I put one here, and then there's a tiny little one right there, but that's just to give the ground a little bit of texture. I might need to add more in the cemetery area as I continue to build and create some of the markers for the graves. I am definitely going out of my comfort zone with this project. It is far from the miniatures and the Josephine house and the dolls even, but it is fun and great to try new challenges, so I would not turn back. And this stuff dries like plaster. It feels like a cast. So it's pretty hard. There are some cracks, but I'm not worried about that at all. Again, I will be going over it with mud, so none of that matters. The mud will fill in any of those areas and look pretty cohesive and consistent throughout. And then I'll just fill in anything with grass and brush and all that stuff. So this is where I'm at for the first episode, tiny friends. I hope you all have enjoyed this. I know it doesn't look like anything right now, but I'm interested in seeing how this comes along myself. So come along with me on my journey, because I'm going to need all the support I can get. This area back here will be all brush and trees, and then the opposite side will be the viewing side. So you can see all the little hills that I've created and all my little finger indents and imprints. If you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button and give it a thumbs up, and let me know what you're thinking in the comments below, because I am definitely curious to hear your thoughts on this, especially if you're a Stephen King fan. Just don't be too hard on me, because I'm gonna do my best to make this a proud piece. If you would like to follow along, please subscribe if you are not subscribed, and thank you to everybody that has subscribed. You guys mean the most to me. You guys are encouraging and kind, inspiring. I love reading your comments. I love hearing your stories. I love learning new things from you guys as well. Don't forget to hit that top bell notification button so that you can be notified every time I upload a new project, and to follow along with me on this journey. Until next time, tiny friends, you guys have a lovely day, and I will see you all on the mini side.